I'm sorry, Twilight. Written by the Seven Saviors. Chapter 1. I've been having some really weird dreams lately. I set the large mug of coffee I'd been nursing for the last 5 minutes down on the dining room table and looked down at Spike, my brows furrowed in concern and curiosity. I see him fidgeting under my bemused gaze, not looking me in the eye, and that makes me worry all the more. Somehow I can tell this isn't going to be a good start to the day ahead, and something in the back of my mind tells me things may only get worse. Ignoring that little niggling voice in my head, I addressed the uneasy Drake, my face serious, but my tone light and encouraging. Oh? What kind of dreams? I ask. Are they keeping you up at night? No, it's nothing like that. Spike replies, shaking his head. He makes odd gestures with his claws as he speaks, as though he's trying to grasp something intangible. It's just... It's hard to explain. They haven't been keeping me up. He trails off and lets out a small groan of irritation, or perhaps embarrassment, judging by the slight blush in his scaly cheeks. But what? I press, my worried frown fading ever so slightly at the sight. I shift in my chair, turning to fully face the baby dragon. What is it, Spike? If it's something you'd rather anybody else not know, then... No. That's not it either. Spike interjects. He raises his claws to his temples, rubbing them softly for a moment before letting out a resigned sigh. It's just... The dreams seem so eerie when I'm having them. But when I think about actually telling you about them, it just seems silly. Well, why don't I be the judge of that? I reply, my frown now fully replaced with a reassuring smile. What's on your mind, Spike? He looks at me for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether or not I'm serious. The moment passes, and he lets out another sigh and shrugs before walking over to the opposite side of the table where the other seat is. I watch him patiently as he scrambles up onto the chair, taking the opportunity to sip more of my rapidly cooling coffee. I frown at the pitch-black liquid sloshing around in my mug for a second or two. Then my horn lights up with a simple thermal-based spell, and I smile in satisfaction as I see steam rise from the mug once again. It's as I decide to take another sip that Spike speaks again, and what he says throws me off enough to make me stop mid-sip. A cat. I blink at him in response and gently set the mug back down. Cat? I repeat, incredibly unsure of where this is going. A cat. He confirms with a solemn nod. Every single night for the past week or so, I've been having this dream where I'm standing inside the doorway of the Golden Oak Library. When I look behind me, there's no door, just complete darkness and absolute silence. He shivers at the memory, and I feel my heart skip a beat for some reason. I call your name. He continues in a somewhat subdued voice. I start reaching for you, but I can't find you anywhere. I can't find any pony. The library is just empty and quiet. His frown deepens, and his gaze lowers to the table in front of him. Then I go upstairs, and that's where I see it. That cat? I surmise, my voice lowering to match Spike's. He nods once, and his face suddenly scrunches up in thought. I would have found it adorable had I not suddenly found myself feeling as uneasy as the little dragon looked when he first approached me. It's lying in my bed, watching me as I come into the bedroom, he says, giving another little shudder. Like it's been waiting for me to show up. What does it look like? I ask, uncertain of whether or not I really want to know. Can you remember? That's just it. He replies with a shake of his head. The cat itself. That's what's hard to explain. It's like, I know it's a cat, but that's all I know. Nothing else about it makes any sense. How do you mean? I push, still uneasy, but terribly curious. What about it doesn't make sense? I don't know. Everything! Spike cries, throwing his arms up in exasperation. I look at it, and my brain says, that's a cat. But my eyes have no clue. It's freaky, Twilight! Alright, I understand, Spike. I say, raising my hooves in placation. I want to ask you to try and explain the unexplainable. No. I'm sorry, Twi. Spike replies with another weary sigh. Ugh. This whole thing's got me messed up and I just want to know what it all means. It's okay, Spike. I assure him with another reassuring smile. Maybe we can figure it out together. If not, we can always ask Luna to look into the matter, so there's no need to worry so much, okay? My words seem to mollify the baby dragon for the most part, and I motion him to continue. Now, what happens next? Well, once I'm in the room, it starts talking to me. His face scrunches up again, and he slowly resumes his explanation a few seconds later. The things it says. When I first started having these dreams, I couldn't understand it at all. It just made sounds. He looks up at me. He looks past me as he tries to remember, his eyes going slightly cloudy in the process. They weren't normal cat sounds either. It was like a bunch of different feral creatures growling and screeching and screaming in my head all at once. That doesn't sound pleasant, I reply, trying and failing to imagine the sound. I start to realize the more I hear about this cat, the less I want to know. I've heard of recurring nightmares, and have even had a few in the past, but this? This doesn't sound normal. It doesn't feel normal. Nevertheless, and despite my own growing apprehension, Spike continues, trying to suppress yet another shudder as he speaks. It definitely wasn't pleasant. And it still isn't really. He says. Then his expression becomes uncomfortable, and he begins to fidget once again. It actually did scare me enough to wake me up when I first heard it. But I think I'm beginning to understand at least a little bit. That's kind of why I decided to tell you about it now. I suddenly have an almost overwhelming urge to end the conversation here and now. I don't want to hear anymore, and that itself worries and confuses me. Thinking on what I've heard so far, the dream certainly sounds unsettling, but it shouldn't have been any scarier than a mild nightmare. Despite this, that same niggling voice from earlier is telling me that this isn't something I want to concern myself with. I'm hit with a sharp pang of guilt at the thought, and forcefully try to shove that strange urge down. It doesn't matter how I feel about what's being said. Spike is troubled, and I chose to hear him out at the very least. At this point, I'm not sure what I can do other than speak to Luna or refer to a few books I have on the subject of dreams and the possible symbolism therein. But I swallow my unease and press on, asking questions I really don't want to ask. It spoke to you again last night? I surmise. And I'm guessing you understood what it said? Another silent nod from Spike. And I swallow, suddenly finding my throat dry. And what did it say? Spike looks at me then. Really looks at me. And there's something in his eyes that I don't like. There's something in those draconic jade irises that I want to hide from. There's something almost accusatory in his gaze. And seeing this, my worry and confusion only grow. Another moment passes, and he looks back down at the table and rubs his arm nervously as he answers, his words more hesitant than before. It was sort of hard to make out, but the cat, it told me you were hiding something from me. He looks back up at me with a small frown. From all of us. From every pony. Chapter 2. I can see it in the slight furrowing of his brow, the way the corners of his mouth turn down just a bit. Naturally, I tell Spike that I'm not hiding anything, not that I can think of at any rate. He watches me intently, searching my face and evidently not liking what he sees. In a way, I can't blame him. His accusation catches me completely off guard, and for a long moment I'm speechless. I have no deep secrets I've kept from Spike or any pony else, but the look on my face probably conveys otherwise. Judging by Spike's expression, he's no doubt mistaken my bewildered look for guilty surprise, shocked that I'd been found out. This is far from the truth, and I try to assuage his suspicions, but he waves my words away with a dismissive claw. He tells me not to worry about it, that it really was just a stupid dream, and that he's probably just paranoid. He even apologizes for bringing it up in the first place so early in the morning. He pushes himself away from the table and hops off his seat, intending to get breakfast started. But I remain where I am, troubled, confused, and admittedly, a bit hurt. I know he still doesn't believe me, just like I know that his dream is more than he's making it out to be. What I don't understand is why he seemingly chooses to trust some creepy dream creature over me. I haven't always been completely truthful with Spike in the past, but few and very far between are the times that I've actually lied to him. Even then, they've never been anything more than white lies. The only times I've really kept any big secrets from him are when birthday and heartwarming presents are involved. I trust Spike and I know he trusts me, so why the sudden distrust? Why listen to this cat when he has no idea of what it really is or its intentions? If it is indeed an actual sapient creature that's somehow managed to invade his dreams and isn't just a figment of his imagination. No. Something is very wrong with this creature, and I aim to find out what it is. I ask Spike if he wants to talk to Luna about the dream, but again, he tells me not to worry about it. He tells me once more that it's just a really weird dream and that he'll stop having it eventually. It's clear that he doesn't even believe what he's saying, but I still find myself struck by how guarded he's suddenly become. Still, I try to ignore the hurt and focus on helping Spike with his problem, whatever it may be. I leave the matter be for a moment, as I join Spike in making breakfast. But his accusation continues to sit like a heavy stone in the back of my mind. The rest of the morning goes by without any more problems, but I silently dwell on Spike's words for the rest of the day and well into the following night. As I lie awake gazing up at Luna's moon through the closed window above my bed, I rack my brain in an attempt to remember whether or not I'd hidden anything from any pony lately. A few minutes turn to half an hour, then a full hour, and in the end, nothing comes to mind. It takes another few moments to pull my thoughts away from the subject, but eventually, I decide to get some sleep. I shift around slightly in an effort to get more comfortable, but something catches my eye and makes my heart leap into my throat. In my peripheral vision, I notice twin flashes of jade shining in the dark. I quickly turn to face the source of the light, my eyes wide, and a sharp, startling gasp escaping my lips. But I'm only met with the gently snoring form of Spike, deeply asleep in his small bed just across the room. I watch him for a short while as I wait for my heartbeat to slow back down to a normal pace. His eyes are closed, his breathing is slow and even, and his features are slack and peaceful. After a time, I manage to convince myself that Spike is fast asleep and take a moment to wonder if he's having the same dream again tonight. Given how serene he looks, I'm not sure, but I give the matter no more thought and finally turn away. As I close my own eyes and pull my blanket closer around me, I try to ignore the sudden and unsettling sensation of another set of eyes bearing down on me from behind. A few days pass by and things settle back into a normal rhythm for the most part, but there are times when I catch Spike acting oddly. The day after we'd talked, I had asked Spike if he was still having that dream, and though he'd told me with as much enthusiasm as he could muster that he hadn't, I knew better. Still, I chose to give him the benefit of the doubt and didn't pursue the issue. We didn't talk about the dream anymore after that, but I did keep an eye on him from that point on. Now, after having observed him for the last few days, I start to see changes in the Drakelink. Minor changes all things considered, but concerning all the same. He gives me strange looks when he thinks I'm not looking, and there are times where I find him mumbling to himself whenever he thinks he's alone. What I find strange is that I can never quite understand what he's saying no matter how hard I listen, and he always seems to stop just as I get within earshot, even when I know he can't see me. I've heard him talk to himself in the past, but he's never been this secretive about what he says. Other than that, I haven't seen him do anything else out of the ordinary, and what I do see and hear is enough to cause me some apprehension. A part of me believes I'm overthinking things, reacting poorly to something that may end up being nothing at all. There are countless reasons why Spike might be acting the way he is, but I don't know what they could possibly be. Nor do I ask my assistant directly. I want to trust that he'll tell me what's wrong, but I know he won't. Though he tries to hide it, I can still see the wariness and suspicion whenever our eyes meet, and before I know it, as much as I want to deny it, I've grown just as wary and suspicious of my faithful assistant as he has of me. Another week or so goes by, and the tension between Spike and I grow. Conversation between the two of us has become awkward, curt, and stilted. He still remains my faithful assistant, helping me when I need him, but it's clear things aren't how they were before our talk. I can feel that tension in the air, but I try to block it out and focus on my research into Spike's recurring dreams. I don't have many books on the subject in the library, but I pull all the knowledge I can from the resources I do have available to me, and find several different interpretations of what may be wrong with Spike. The interpretations range from the baby dragon being uncertain about his future, to repressed emotions or feelings of loneliness, and many different issues in between. The more I read, the more I'm convinced that none of these interpretations fit the scenario. I cast aside the books regarding dream symbolism and turn instead to a book on demons and other magic-based creatures. One of my guesses is that this cat might be some kind of malevolent being that somehow invaded Spike's subconscious and is trying to turn him against me for some unknown purpose. If that is the case, then I'd have to get Luna involved, as I had no way of fighting against something like that. I planned to seek Princess Luna's aid regardless of what I found out, but I wanted to have a firmer grasp on the situation before I spoke with her, so she'd have more to work with than a vague description and some suspicions. Unfortunately, while there are some monsters and demons that have the ability to enter and even devour dreams, I find nothing matching the specific entity that Spike described. I entertain the idea of a shapeshifter, but nothing I read indicates any kind of shape-shifting creature that can also enter dreams. I don't rule out that they exist, as I only have the one book in my library to refer to, and I'm certain it doesn't contain everything I need to know. Unsatisfied with the results, I give up on my search and resign myself to asking Luna for help with barely anything to go on. I'm hoping her experience will be enough to compensate for my lack of knowledge, and that she'll be able to do something for Spike. I don't like the tension. I don't like the rift that's slowly forming between Spike and I. I want it to stop. I want things to go back to how they were before Spike told me about his recurring dreams, and I pray that Luna can help me make that happen. I try my best to keep it from Spike, but the stress and anxiety is beginning to get to me. It's late at night, almost morning by my guess, and even now I rise from my small desk in my room and snuff out the candle I'd been using to read by. I can still feel the weight of those eyes on my back. My ears twitch as I listen to the sound of Spike's slow and steady breathing, and I try to find solace in that, but I can no longer ignore that hideous, unseeing gaze. It seeps into every pore and makes my skin crawl. I get very little sleep that night, just like the last few nights before. Chapter 3. I frown at Rarity's dismissive response, not at all happy with the way she's treating the situation. After some deliberation, I'd decided to talk to a couple of my friends about what's been going on between Spike and I. I wanted to get some additional input before I sent a letter to Luna about Spike's dreams. I was hoping they could give some insight into any other options or solutions I'd missed. Given who the subject of the issue was, the first pony I came to was Rarity. She may not care for Spike in the same way he does for her, but she's almost as fond of the little Drake as I am. With that in mind, I left Spike back at the library and made my way over to Carousel Boutique to talk with Rarity. Despite how busy she was, the mare was more than willing to listen to what I had to say, and I certainly had plenty to say. Her reply, unfortunately, left a lot to be desired. While this recurring dream does sound rather strange, I don't believe it's cause for any concern, Rarity says, ignorant of my growing irritation as she continues to carefully push whatever fabric she was working on through her sewing machine. All that brooding, the dirty looks, the secrecy, it's clearly a sign that our favorite little Drake is growing up. I acted much the same as a filly, and I'm going through something similar with Sweetie Belle right now. She pauses in her work and turns to give me a sympathetic smile. It will all pass eventually, Twilight, just like that dream. And like a dream, it'll be as if nothing ever happened between you two. I'm not so sure it's that simple, Rarity. I reply with the utmost patience. It's not just the dirty looks and secrecy I'm worried about. Lately he's been vanishing off to who knows where without warning, and when he does, I can't seem to find him anywhere. It's never for more than half an hour or so, but when I ask him where he's been, he just gives me this blank look and says things like, I just went out for some air, or I took a walk around town for a bit. Most of the time, he doesn't say anything at all. When was the last time you saw him just take a walk around town, Rarity? Rarity raises an eyebrow and looks at me over her red-framed glasses. Every time you or I ask him to run an errand for us? She replies slowly. I'm sorry, Twilight dear, but I'm still not seeing the same problem that you are. Forgive me if I sound rude, but from my perspective, all I can see is a mother trying to deal with her rebellious son. I stare back at the other mare in disbelief, my mouth flapping uselessly as I struggle to find a response. I actually take a moment to play everything I've told Rarity back in my head and realize she's right. I do sound like a concerned mother, and I can't even deny it. The truth is, in some ways, that's exactly what I feel like. The realization does nothing to deter me from my suspicions, but I make a mental to tweak my explanation so I'm taken more seriously when I write my letter to Princess Luna. A sigh snaps me out of my thoughts, and I focus back on Rarity, just in time to see her shut off her machine and fully turn to face me. I may not understand your thought process here, Twilight, but I can see this is important to you," she says with a reassuring grin. "Why don't I talk to Spike for you? Perhaps see if I can find the root of this problem. Would that put you at ease?" It wouldn't. In fact, I'm afraid of what might happen if she does. Still, I did ask for help, and if anybody else could get through to Spike, I would assume it'd be Rarity. Aside from that, and despite what she says, I can see from her earnest expression that she's also worried about Spike and truly does want to help. She's a lot like Fluttershy in that way, and I suppose kindness and generosity tend to go hoof and hoof. I have my misgivings, but it doesn't take me long to agree to let her talk to Spike. "Very well then. I still have some work left to do here, but I'll stop by the library in, say, half an hour?" she asks. I tell her that's fine, and she nods before lighting up her horn and pulling a small purple bit pouch from one of the shelves near the wall of her workroom. I watch in bemusement as she pulls out a few bits and floats them over to me. "What's this for?" I ask, taking the bits into my own magic and casting a quizzical frown at Rarity. "It's obvious that this whole affair has taken its toll on you, dear. Baggy eyes, ratty mane, horribly crinkled tail, and your coat is as coarse as badly spun wool," Rarity replies, shaking her head and setting the bit pouch aside. She reactivates her sewing machine and begins her work anew as she speaks. "You look absolutely dreadful, darling. I'll deal with Spike, but I want you to take that and pay a visit to Aloe and Lotus at the spa. Tell them I sent you, and they'll take good care of you." I drop the floating bits into an upturned hoof and frown at them, then look back up to Rarity. "Rarity, I appreciate the offer, but—" "No excuses, Twilight Sparkle," Rarity interjects, snapping her machine off and whipping around to face me again. Her tone is hard, and her glare harder. "I want you to march right down to that spa, and I want you to treat yourself. Stop for nothing, and don't you dare come out of that building until your coat, mane, and tail are all shining with the radiance of Celestia's brilliant sun. Is that understood?" Caught off by her intensity, I flounder for something to say, some kind of objection. I open my mouth to speak, but Rarity's glare sharpens, and I shut it again, let out a long resigned sigh, and nod once. I let the irritation drain out of me, and give Rarity a grateful, if tired, smile. "All right, you win, Rarity," I finally reply, feeling lighter than I have in the past few weeks. "I'll go and pamper myself like a proper mare should. Would that be to your liking, my lady?" "It very much would, yes," Rarity replies, raising her muzzle and speaking in a snooty tone. We share a small laugh, and she gives me another reassuring smile. "In all seriousness, you don't need to worry much, Twilight. All Spike needs is time and a caring word or two, and things will be right as rain. You'll see." "I hope you're right, Rarity," I reply quietly, because I'm not sure what else to do at this point. I don't tell her about my plan to write to Luna, nor do I tell her about the eyes that watch me, or the strange sense of foreboding that seems to have settled over the library lately. Visits to the library are scarce normally, but nowadays, it's like no pony wants anything to do with the place. I can't blame them, and I know Rarity will find out for herself soon enough, so I hold my tongue on that matter, we say our goodbyes, and I turn to leave the boutique. Just as I reach the door to her workroom, a sudden thought hits me, and I turn back to the hard-working seamstress. "Hey, Rarity?" I begin tentatively. "Can I ask you something?" "What is it, dear?" Rarity calls back, keeping her eyes on her work. "Is something else the matter?" "No, it's just..." I pause for a second as I try to find the right words to say. This is probably going to sound strange, but have I acted or done anything you thought was suspicious lately? The machine dies down yet again, and Rarity looks at me, completely bewildered. I'm sorry, but I don't quite follow, she says. Can you give me a bit more detail? It's about what Spike said. I explain. How he thinks I'm hiding something. Not just from him, but every pony. I have no idea what he's talking about, but maybe... I don't know. Maybe I just don't remember. Ah, I see. Rarity replies, nodding her head. She lifts a hoof to her chin and hums in thought for a few seconds. Well, I can't think of anything right off hoof, but... She suddenly gives me an oddly sardonic smile. You're an incredibly smart man, Twilight. If some pony like you really wanted to keep secrets, I doubt even Celestia herself would be the wiser. My first instinct is to deny the claim, but I stop myself and really think about what Rarity says. I am a capable mare, I won't deny that. But am I really capable enough to keep a secret from myself? Maybe. I mutter, though I know whether or not I'm talking to Rarity or myself. I guess that's something to think about. Rarity says something else as I trot out of the workroom, but I don't hear her, lost in my own thoughts, as I am.